Welcome back to the Eric Krown crypto channel. Wishing you a happy early start to this nice new week. It's a new week, probably not too many opportunities as it's a holiday week kind of. And I suspect that things will be more or less on the slower side. Slow, actually kind of good for the Bitcoin boolas here if it does indeed happen. However, as we'll go over at the end of this video, there is still a bit of an issue on the higher term timeframes, which we'll go over very specific numbers as to what you expect with that. And then other than that, I think it's time for me to get right on into the actual analysis of the day. So I want to follow up on last Friday. Last Thursday and Friday, we were looking at a move likely lower to the bottom side of the 80% range lows, historical range lows right here on the HPDR indicator based off of the breakage of, more importantly, 17,550 on a closing basis. Obviously, all of that happened and it's slowly coming to fruition, or it has slowly come to fruition, and that leads us into where we're at today. So this would be theoretically a natural bounce region. With that in mind, let's see if there's anything else that does corroborate that story, and we can actually use the hourly on the HPDR indicator in order to get a little bit of a pick me up in that regard. And so what do we have here? Well, we have a setup, and this setup again is I think, yeah, I actually recorded a video on this particular setup for the HPDR indicator, and it is this one right here. Anyways, the first condition for this setup was closures below the blue 50% range lows. Obviously, that started to happen here on Friday, and that initiates then the second condition for looking for contraction and volatility. And that we have as of right here, obviously, while simultaneously still closing below those lows. In fact, it actually happens a little bit sooner than that. It'd be theoretically right, or not theoretically, it is quite factually right there, obviously. But that then initiates the overall setup, of which, whenever this setup has been given, we have observed, if I go and reference the data over here on the hourly time frame, about a almost 2.25% bounce, with, of course, a relatively high win rate, I would say, about 72% win rate for the tested iterations. And obviously this one is going to be taking, well, a long time, as you might imagine, because we haven't really seen the move transpire just yet. So with that in mind, going back to the charts over here, obviously no setup is complete without some sort of risk management, some area to be aware of where the setup essentially gets invalidated. And that would be with a closure below the range lows, which I'm using the Lux algo to kind of derive over here, which is basically that 16,550-ish number or so on an hourly closing basis. Until then, from the actual setup, we would be looking at on the average, about 2.25% gain, which would put Bitcoin actually back above 17,000 bucks, closer to 17,200. Now, of course, I do think it'd be a little bit aggressive to be looking for a bigger move like that. If anything, I do think that we're going to see, assuming that this one does go into the win category, we will probably see something a little bit closer to the bottom side of the first standard deviation, which is this data right here. In case you're wondering, this is the average win percentage, this is the win percentage. This is the average gain for the winners. This is standard deviation, first standard deviation measurements, min, max, and then this is the loss side basically. So this was for the losing trades. Anyways, going back into it here, if we were to just look at a more humble gain of 1%, where would that essentially put Bitcoin? Well, that would put Bitcoin still about 17,000 bucks or so. So somewhere between about 17,000 to 17,200 is where I do think, a probable bounce, if we are going to see this one continue to bounce, emerge from. And again, invalidation would be, an hourly closure below about 16,550. That would not just validate that, but probably validate more downside, as we'll go into a little bit later. Anyways, is there anything else that does corroborate that story from a different angle? Well, we don't have to go too far to go over here for CME's 4-hour ranges. In this case, a couple things of interest. We have this area marked off the prior range lows at 16,550 to 16,650. Obviously, Bitcoin's in that region right now. You can also see that the 618 Fibonacci retracement is also coming into that region here too. And we are seeing this simultaneously with a decrease, or what looks like volatility going into a contraction phase. So volatility contracting into range lows, alongside momentum also just turning up, like the 4-hour jewel, which might actually get a nice signal there a little bit later today. Again, probably more likely to bounce off this region first than anything else. And the question is, how high does the bounce get, and where do things actually change for a potential bounce? Well, in this case, certainly anything above like 17,550 would be massively bullish for the higher term timeframes. But on the lower term timeframes, as far as bounce targets goes, like I said, statistically speaking, 17,000 to 17,200 does seem kind of like the area of interest in this case. And I would start to say that things do start to, again, change. Very specifically above 17,500, like very in a big way. But a big red flag warning signal will be actually initiated above the 382 here, which is 17,300. And that would be sort of like an early indication that this is not just a bounce, this is a reversal, and Bitcoin very likely does trade back up towards 18,000 if that happens. Until then, I would not be saying anything of the sort. I'd just be saying this is a range bound, or this is range bound in the short term. And of course, on the other side, if Bitcoin closed below the range lows here, which is 16,550 on CME, it's kind of a range between 16,650 and 16,550. I'd go a little more lenient on it with the downside. Then I would be looking at this as very likely to be a continuation to very low $16,000 territory. Might try for another short-term bounce there, but after that, extremely likely to come back down to the prior weekly range lows, somewhere around 15,700 to 15,800. Very high probability in that case. And what do you know? That would also be the invalidation for this particular setup over here as well. So I do like the confluence in that, as it naturally should happen. And in the meantime, if I'm going off statistics, I do think that a short-term bounce a little bit more likely. We can also go reference stochastic momentum, starting off with the 12-hour time frame here on CME. 12-hour stochastic momentum is obviously still very aggressively moving to the downside. I am curious to see what it looks like on spot price action, just to see what the number is. And it's actually significantly closer to price action, obviously because spot was trading over the weekend, showing 16,650 as a momentum pivot. If we go back to the CME one, which does typically have a better hit rate, or just better, more likelihood to play out, especially in the early week, that number would be 17,840. So significantly different right there. But I did think that was, pretty interesting. 6-hour time frame will actually turn back up above 17,000 bucks, again coming in from a very low level over here. 4-hour time frame is actually already turning up as long as Bitcoin's above 16,500. So again, if Bitcoin does break below 16,550, you're going to see a range break, you're going to see prior invalidation, and then you're also going to see momentum turn down. And then the hourly time frame is probably going to be up as well. Yeah, and will be holding up above as long as Bitcoin's above 16,550. So short term, again, I do think a bounce is more likely here than not. But here's the thing, and I don't want to lean too heavily into this just because this is still awaiting validation. But I do want to be aware that the higher term timeframes, like the 2-day time frame, still does have this setup over here. And while the setup is not valid or viable just yet, it is brewing, and it is simply just a matter of time before it does fire off. And at that point, we're going to see a pretty fucking large move, probably somewhere around 30 to 40%. Anyways, in this case, 2-day time frame volatility represented by the BBWP indicator. Anytime that it's gotten below the 10 percentile threshold here, over the past almost 5 years now, the average move that transpires from that region upon volatility expansion has been about 35% over the course of an average of close to 3 weeks. And if we were to take a first standard deviation measurement, it would give us a range between about 25.5% all the way up to almost 44%. Now, the stochastic oscillator has been correct in getting the direction of that volatility expansion 84.5% of the time almost. So in this case, when we go ahead and reference the stochastic oscillator, we can see that as of right now, it is positioned to the downside, and it is showing, and it will continue to remain to the downside as long as Bitcoin's below basically 18,000 bucks on this next closing basis, which is tomorrow. Here's the thing though, until we get official volatility expansion over here, it can stay in these low volatile regions for a long time, similar to what we saw actually in October over here, or even in June as well. But once that starts to turn up, the highly probable direction is whatever direction the 2-day time frame stochastic also is pointed in, and right now it is down. So if we were to see volatility expansion from here, very likely we see a big move to the downside, and we could apply these percentages, which basically gets you towards either the current weekly range lows or to new lows closer to like 13,500 bucks. By the same token, if we were to see it hold here and then turn back up, that could put Bitcoin back up towards 20,000 plus. So, you know, until we actually get the volatility expansion, it's still neither here nor there, but it is a brewing. It's a brewing in the background. And so I wanted to bring that up just because Bitcoin does start to fail here. You do have to interpret the probability that you're going to see volatility expansion. And at that point, you know, highly likely we're going to see, you know, big meltdowns. So that's why I do have a very strong importance on even the medium-term time frame range lows for CME here, just because it does have major, you know, avalanche of effects that follows after it. Very, very likely, I'd say. Anyways, I think that's a good place for me to be leaving off on this particular video. Statistics still suggest bounce a little bit more probable than not, but after that, again, do be aware that a bounce is not the same thing as reversal. First major warning flag that Bitcoin's actually, you know, going to push its way towards 18,000 bucks would be above 17,300 on a closing basis. Full on confirmation would be above like 17,550 last week's breakdown point. All right, sweet. That's going to do it for today's video. I hope that was in some way helpful. I want to wish you the best as always. Forgot to shill good old Bybit, but there's no one new in this market anyways. So if you don't already know, they have their promotions going on they have their promotions going on, which will be somewhere in this video. All right, cool. Yes, that's it for today. Much love, take care, and see you hopefully soon.